Okay, so in this section, we're going to cover the two modes of market analysis, SE, and land use or parcel level analysis. We're going to talk about the census and ACS, the employment data that comes or is being used in TBEST, and the parcel land use configuration a little bit. We're going to create a market analysis using the wizard. We've already experienced a couple of market analysis tools where we don't use the wizard, where you can just click on different buttons and it'll pop up a market analysis or a socioeconomic analysis just for your target route, right? So, but we're going to do different varieties of this with this particular section. And we're going to look at the market analysis interface, how you can control the market analysis and the options involved. Okay, so here is the general interface, and we've seen this several times already, but essentially it summarizes the intensity of distribution of land use or SE data and employment data. It is interactive, or you can change the variables, change some of the summary types to do a profile versus an individual variable. You can summarize land use or SE data in this environment, and it's limited to the geographic extent of the transit system service area. So, so you can also summarize this relative to the service area counts. So that would give you some context in terms of, yes, okay, my market around my routes has, 50,000 people. What percentage of the service area is that? Is that 10%, 20%, 30%? So that's another statistic that TBEST can provide you, is that percentage of the service area total. It does use the growth rates. So if you have any growth rates that you've applied, the market analysis will include the growth that's applied. And everything is exportable out to Excel and ArcGIS, just like everything else is in TBEST. Okay, in terms of some of the demographic variables, there are many that you can render here. We've already looked at some of these categories in terms of the characteristics that you can render. You can also look at profiles. That would be kind of a, show you a chart of the values instead of individual variables at a time. You can do this relative to stops, segments, patterns, routes, or your unique geographies that we create for a mobility area. You can compare the selected market with the total system average. I just mentioned that. And exportable. So this is an example of a map in Gainesville where we generated the market analysis for population enrolled in college. So that's one of the variables that we have in TBEST, is enrolled in college. And this is a TDP example of population enrolled in graduate studies, and could be enrolled in college as well. But essentially that same map that's included in a TDP could be generated out of TBEST and placed into TDP. So this is one of the central themes of this training, is to be able to take the data out of TBEST and put it directly into a TDP or a planning document, a COA, et cetera, to help you formulate some of this, so that you don't have to go out into your own GIS world and kind of build up this data and then analyze it, et cetera. It's kind of already available on your desktop, that you can produce a lot of these maps without going to any additional effort. So the next topic is the land use coverage. So we've talked about this in different levels already, but not specifically about the land use detail that's within TBEST. And so the summarization for the parcels and the land use data goes back to the variables that we keep for them, which are have to do with the building square footage, the person trips. Remember, that's the IT trip generation rates that are calculated for each parcel in the network, in the system. And the number of dwelling units in the parcel area, and even the population per parcel. So all of those variables are available to you in this environment, and they're also grouped by the land use type, or a grouping of land use, such as residential and commercial industrial, or you can get to individual types like single family, multifamily, et cetera. And all of those roll back into that spreadsheet that we looked at before, where it's the land use, or the land use trip rate spreadsheet. And so basically the trip generation rates are tied to that spreadsheet. So if you were to modify the spreadsheet and pull that in, that would show up in this market analysis tool as well. So for Florida, everyone has this data already. So that's super. All you have to do is start using it. That's it. For outside of Florida, we have Matthew from Fredericksburg, Virginia, and he is configuring parcel data for several areas in around Fredericksburg. And it is a process because you have different data from different jurisdictions that may not be the same. They have different levels of accuracy, etc. So you might have to pull from multiple data sources, and it's a little more of a chore to do this outside of Florida. So all of you can be jealous of Florida because this data is rolled up to the state level from all of the counties, and it would be great if everyone did that. We would have some super data sets around the country to use for this type of analysis. So the analysis can be anything, just like it is for the socioeconomic. It can be stops, segments, patterns, or any user geography in a mobility area, and all exportable out to ArcGIS. So here's another summary or example from a TBEST summary land use detail that you can render the data in TBEST and then push that data out into a land use map that you would use in your TDP, etc. So, so this is another good example of rolling up the data. So this is actually point level data, but I think in this map, it's kind of rolled up to maybe a census block, which in ArcGIS, that would be a pretty easy post process to do an intersect and summary of that data and put it into some sort of polygon context as opposed to a point level context. Okay, so as I said, we looked at different ways of opening the market analysis tool, but one way that we can do it is through a wizard. And that allows us, when we're doing the analysis and setting up our market analysis, to do this in a consistent way that we can set the variables that we want to go into our market analysis. So this is the initial screen in our analysis setup. And you can see that you can select either the parcel land use data or the SE data. And these variables will change a little bit when you select either one, but by default for SE data, it's market variable distribution. And your market capture distance can be a quarter of a mile or whatever you have. Now, I will say that this number by default, if you tie this back into yesterday's training, by default, this will always be your Title VI policy. Go back to your transit system Title VI policy. So your walk market capture distance that you define for Title VI will always be the default here. You can modify it here and override it, but by default, it will always come from your Title VI policy. The walk distance from stops, and you're going to clip the market zone geometry at the boundary. So that means that we're going to all those walk access polygons where it goes out and overlaps with census blocks. So instead of taking all of the geometry from an intersected census block, we're going to clip them at the market boundary. So it only takes what's inside, not the full census block. You can check that off, and it would then take the full amount from the census block that it intersects with, or you can clip it. So it's up to you. All right, so by default, when you execute it, the second part of the wizard is select what you want to analyze. And that could either be the full system, it could be the selected routes, patterns, segments, or stop, or within a mobility area. You could also do on the next panel of the wizard, compare market totals with service area totals. So you can have the option to select your county that you want to define. That would be the service area, or a mobility area that would be the service area. So again, this goes back to comparing the totals around, let's say, selected stops, and what percentage of the service area total is within the market boundary, right? So if it's 10% of the service area is of totals or within that particular market boundary that we're defining for the stops, then it will show it there. Okay, and then once we get through the wizard, we'll come to the actual market interface where we have all of our options. Obviously, we have the map. We have a data summary that will kind of spell out the distribution that's tied to the map. So the color codings that are shown here will be the color codings in the map and the ranges of values. And then the population in this case that's inside of each one of these ranges, and then the total for the market value. You also have a chart and some options for display, one of which is this summarized relative to Title VI, which I think we will get into in just a moment. So in terms of the interface, you can select, and this is for the socioeconomic data, you can select any of the variables that are available, and it will update the data summary and the chart to be reflective of those distributions of population or whatever variable you select. You can also, in the market analysis tool, do the same kind of filtering, except you also have the ability to filter to individual land use types, and we'll get into this in our exercise. But this is really handy for identifying specific land uses and their intensity in your area, your market area, whatever that might be. So it's really easy to identify office buildings and professional buildings and restaurants or shopping centers that exist along your route in this case. Okay, so in terms of some of the options here, in terms of summary, you have your market variable distribution that you can select. That you also have different profiles that you can select that would aggregate the data. So let's see. Yeah, okay. And then you have the feature display options as well, which allows you to toggle the visibility of the network inside the map or show the market boundary or rendering of the chart labels, etc. For the land use side, you can choose different land use groups, such as an aggregate, such as residential, commercial, and it will summarize those groups for you. But you can do it by person trips or population or dwelling units and land area and building square footage. So you have lots of really intense data analysis that you can do once you get your parcel data in that allows you to segment the land use types the way that you want to display them in the map and then analyze for your particular project. One additional tool that you have here is this section in the middle where it says summarize relative to system average or Title VI. So this is a really neat tool that once you enable it, it changes your summary for whatever variable you're on. And primarily what we're showing is the Title VI minority population market variable. So what it does is it calculates the system average for that variable, meaning that on average, there's 24% of the population are minority. And so that what we want to do is show all of those census blocks that where the population is above the system average and below the system average. So the lighter blue shade is below the system average, and that's 24% of the population. I'm sorry, 24% is the average. That's only 6% of the minority population in this market area. And those that are above the system average are here, right? So it's a really great way to show kind of in the Title VI framework what's above and below a system average, and system average is kind of a key component of Title VI. What's good about this too is you can change the system average. So even though TBEST calculates 24.33, you can enter another number that might be more representative of some other distribution that you might want to come up with and hit apply, and it will update the map. So that's a great tool to be used for a different type of analysis relative to the system average. All right, so just to tie this all back into the TDP handbook, there are several areas where you can use the market summaries to help you with the different areas of your TDP, and all of those are referenced here for you. Okay, and Also for the COAs and other types of summaries, you have it listed where you can do different types of, use our different types of tools and have them fill different levels of analysis for different types of reporting on an operational basis. So again, this is just for your reference to come back to see where TBEST might be able to meet some needs that your need for your market analysis. Okay. All right. So any questions out there?
I don't see any questions.
Okay. So let's start up with our next exercise, which is to create a land use market analysis for crosstown routes. So if not already open the fall 2021. So we're in fall 2021. So what we want to do is the second option, hold the control key down and select routes 23 and 75 on the routes panel. Okay, so we have our route 25, which is here. And I'm sorry, 23, my fault. And 75. So I have 23 and 75 selected. And notice that these are both crosstown routes. Okay, right click on the routes panel and select land use market analysis from the context menu. So I'm going to right click here. It doesn't matter, anywhere in the routes panel will do, and go to land use market analysis. And that should pop up the TBEST market analysis setup wizard. And make sure that we have parcel land use data selected. Our initial data summary category will be person trips. That's fine. The time period will be weekday. That's fine too. So the person trips that it's going to display and calculate are going to be for the full weekday, right? So it's going to be both production and traction trips. So it's total trips aggregated out to a full weekday. And this is the walk market capture distance, and the distance from the stops is what we want. So we're going to click next. And going on to 5, on the what to analyze screen, selected routes option should be selected. It is selected. And then on 6, on the compare, we're going to click next. On the compare market totals with service area totals, select the option to define service area by county and verify that Alachua County is selected. Okay, yes. So once again, we're going to select this option. And once again, if you think back to yesterday where we set the system service area in the transit system operation and policy settings, we set it to Alachua County only. So by default, it will select only Alachua County here because that's what we set as our service area. Okay, and hit next. And that's it. We hit apply. And yes, we want to proceed. Okay. So item 7 is when the report is loaded, review the land use person trips by land use group values and distribution in the map. Okay, so we have our residential person trips listed in the data summary, and they are in yellow. And also in the map, they are in yellow, and over here in the chart, they are also in yellow. You can see that they are 9.7% of the total trips that are generated. You can see that commercial is in, what is that? It's not orange, kind of red, I guess. And that's 77% of the total market trips are commercial trips. And on down the line where you have some government trips in here, institutional, etc. Okay. Item 8 is in the summary mode drop-down list, select land use detail. So this is the summary mode list, and right now it's set to land use groups, but we're going to change that to land use detail. Okay, so that changes the map and it changes our list and our chart. And I'm going to just maximize this window so it's a little more visible and we can see all this a little better. Okay, item 9 is in the feature display options box, uncheck all features visible. So that is over here. So all features visible is in our feature display options, and we can use this check box to basically turn everything off. Okay. So Brian is having some issues, Matt. So
Yeah, I'm gonna move to breakout room.
okay. All right. So yeah, so basically you have this and so you can turn everything off. So let's see what it says here. Use the data summary panel to select one land use category at a time. All right. So I can do that. I'm going to just resize this a little bit. And you can see that there are lots of land use types that I can choose from. And I'm going to choose single family here. So I have 35,600 person trips, and that's for 2.5% of the market area person trips are generated from single family. And that's 3.7% of the service area person trips, right? So this is when I say 4.2% of the, this is of the total market area. So this is all land uses combined. When you look at the service area, this is 3.7% of just single family. So 30.7% of single family person trips are generated in this particular market for the service area. So we can add mobile homes here as well. We can add multifamily dwelling units. We can also zoom in on this. So if we wanted to see a little bit more detail, we can do that. So if I want to just see my multifamily greater than 10 units, then here are the parcels that are in that particular category and their locations. So that's kind of valuable information to have if you're planning routes to see that kind of land use relative to your routes. Okay, so you can kind of see where you can do. I'm going to actually turn all the features back on, and I'll just click this twice and it'll turn everything back on. What you'll notice is that you do show all of the distributions, and inside of this, the size of the parcel is relative to the number of person trips that are being generated out of it. So I just want you to realize that the magnitude here is relative to the trip activity. So you can see the trip activity at the Oaks Mall is very high, right? We expect that, well, maybe not so much now as opposed to a few years ago, but definitely a high activity around the mall. This is all commercial in this area. So you can see a lot of trip generation in commercial spaces happening here. Now, if I want to switch this instead of land use detail, maybe I want to go to just commercial, then that would filter all of my commercial properties and show just those properties. And then I could get into diagnosing which is which. And what's kind of handy too is you can sort by these columns. So if I want to show all of the what's the, the land use that has the most person trips that are being generated, then that is the regional shopping centers. And in this case, maybe I just want to show regional shopping centers. So I'm going to turn everything else off and turn on regional shopping centers. So yes, those are my kind of mall and maybe box store kind of shopping centers here on the map. So you have a lot of control over what you render in this map and also how you would summarize this parcel land use data. And we've been summarizing by person trips, but you can change that to building square footage. So this isn't so much of a measure of person trips, this is the total building square footage column that's now here. So you can see if we actually sort by building square footage, that again, regional shopping centers are still the most square footage in terms of commercial, and community shopping centers, hotels, etc. over here. Okay. All right. So I went into some detail there. It asked some specific questions about the different square footages and the population. So most of that we kind of already looked at in terms of answering some of these questions that are in line 10 for A, B, and C. I did want to switch and answer D. What is the population of single family homes? So that's something that we can also get from this interface. So if we switch to residential land use instead of commercial, and we go to our population variable, we can see in our summary that we have single family population here, multifamily, mobile home, condominiums. And the question is, what is the population of single family homes? And it is 5,942. Okay, so the next item is 11. Use the export button on the land use market analysis toolbar to export the data to a GeoDatabase. When the export completes, TBEST will prompt you to open in ArcMap. So this is what we can do, and we've seen this in a couple areas, but we can export the data, to GeoDatabase. So this option at the top under export data to GeoDatabase. And again, we'll go into our data exports, and we'll just call this land use crosstown. And file GeoDatabase option in our data exports folder, and we'll just hit save. So it's going to export the data plus the parcels. So the parcels are coming out as well. And yes, we do want to see this in ArcMap. So again, extracts the data out of TBEST and into a separate file GeoDatabase that you can then render in TBEST. And I think this is, yes, this is over. I had to pan a little bit to find it. So you can see that exactly how we had it rendered in ArcMap, or I'm sorry, in TBEST is now in ArcMap. And you can see how that's done here in this parcel summary. So that you have a little bit of information about how the groupings are for each land use type and the color schemes and within the map. And of course, all of this can be opened in the attribute table. So this is a really handy export where you have the use code, the land use code here and here. So here's the land use type, the person trips that are generated for each parcel, the population, the land square footage, the number of residential units. So this is your number of dwelling units, and the total living area, which is your internal heated building square feet. Very useful information that you can pull out and do additional analysis in land use markets on. And so yeah, so that's a great tool to be able to export this data out. So I'm going to exit ArcMap and save it. And let's close the land use market analysis. We're going to keep our wizard open, and we're going to move on to our next step, which is create a socioeconomic market analysis for crosstown routes. So in our wizard, we can just hit the back button and go all the way back to our original categorization, and we're going to switch it to socioeconomic data instead of parcel land use. Everything else we're going to keep the same. So when we go to next, it will be selected routes. We had already selected to define the service area by county in Alachua County, so that's good. And we'll hit apply to then open that same area with our crosstown routes, except this time use the socioeconomic data. All right, so yeah, so this is kind of the same setup as we had a couple of times before, where it opens the markets for it, and we see that we have the map distribution and the color codes are tied to the distribution and ranges that are in or rendered in the map. We also have those same ranges summarized here, and these are actually population counts inside each of these ranges, and the percent of the total market for total population inside these ranges. Okay, so item 3 is to use the data summaries. And actually, sorry, when the report is loaded, this is item 2. When the report is loaded, in the data profile selection box, explore the categories within the summary market variables drop-down list. So here are the variables in the list, and certainly we can change any one of these. So if we want to change to population age that's less than 18 years, then the summary will switch, and also the map will switch to do that rendering. How about greater than 65 is here. Also notice in this summary that it's giving you the percentages. So if it's 0 to 20% that are greater than 65, it's listed here. And it gives you the actual population count that is in that range. So anything that's in this light shade of blue, the total population in those light shades is 884. And that's actually 51% of the total market is in this kind of low density relative to greater than 65 years of population. Years of age in terms of the population that meets that criteria. And this is 9.7% of the total population. So essentially 10% of your population in this market is over 65 years of age. And this is the count. Okay. All right, so let's go to item 3. Use the data summaries and summary variables to answer the following questions for the route area. How many commercial employees are there and how many total workers? So if we want to go to commercial employment, so there's 4,726 commercial employees. And to get to the total employment, we'll again come up and change our selection to total employment. And there are 15,072 total employees in the market area. What is the area's Title VI minority population? So let's switch over to Title VI. Population. Okay. So so here's the 8,809 is the total minority population. What is the percent of the market area that uses Spanish as their primary language? So again, we can switch our variable into primary language Spanish. And that is, what is the percent? That's 1.9%. Okay, and you have, what is the average income of the area? So we'll go to average income. Here's our average income. So it's 68,038. And Adam is asking a question. Household income has many detailed brackets. Is it possible to group them like less than 40K or, other aggregations of that? Inside of here, I would say that the answer would be not at present. But of course, you can export this data, and we will do that. And all of those specific columns that match those groupings will be available to you. And then you can calculate whatever column you would want inside of ArcMap. That would be the ranges that you would want, and then display it there. So that's kind of the little bit of the Swiss Army knife that we talked about yesterday, where yes, okay, it doesn't do exactly what you want, but the data is there, probably there in some way to help you actually perform that. So we can look at that once we export this out. Okay, so how many people are enrolled in college and enrolled in K through 12? So I'm going to actually, to answer this question, I'm going to change this to a data profile. And I want to do an education data profile. So here's my education level profile. Now, what happens when I switch this is that it gives me all of the variables that are education variables and puts them into the data summary and also puts them here into the chart. So with this question, because I had two relative to enrolled in college in K through 12. So enrolled in college is 3,071 and enrolled in K through 12 is 3,071. Enrolled in college is 2,304. So this is just a different summary relative to a specific grouping that you can run. How many zero car households? So again, if we want to look at zero car households here, we have auto ownership as a profile. And this will actually give us all of our different households in terms of 0, 1, 2, and 3, and in terms of vehicle counts. So zero vehicle is 642.
Rodney,
Mhm.
if you go back to the market distribution, Zeb has a question. This data is generated by block group census area within a quarter-mile buffer. So does this mean if a census block is half within the quarter-mile buffer and half not, does the data only take the census block group total at 50%? Is it proportionate?
It is. You
Yes.
also, yes, and you also notice that some of the variables are rendered at the block level and some at the block group level. So that has to do with the level that's represented in the data. So the census SF1 files that we use as an input, some of them are block level data, such as total population, minority population, households. Those are block level variables that we keep in TBEST, and others come from the ACS, and those are block group level variables. So you notice that the actual construction of this is at the block group. So this is intersecting block group geography as opposed to block, because this is a block group level variable. But if we were to switch this to total population, you can see that the geography changes. And because we're keeping data at the block level for total population, then the actual geography will change for that variable. So the, the geography aggregation is dependent on the variables itself and the source of that variable's geography.
And a follow-up, can you set it to not clip at the boundary, and what happens to the totals then?
Yeah, so I'll just close this market analysis and I'll go all the way back in my wizard. And you have this clip market zone geometry here that you can check off, and you can just run the same report here. I'll just say yes. Should be a kind of faster probably to load because it's not doing any clipping. So now you see that it takes the full census block or block group and then summarizes the markets relative to the full block that it intersects, and does not take the proportion that Zeb was talking about, where it's a proportion. So this is the total of that block or block group. Okay, so we have one other topic I want to approach here, and that is item 5. Oh, sorry. Did we export? No, we did not export. So let's export this to data to GeoDatabase. And so we click this, select data to GeoDatabase. Again, we'll go into our data exports folder. This will be our crosstown SE data. You can name it whatever you wish. This one I'm calling it. And again, it'll go out to an external file GeoDatabase that it creates. Okay, so what we have here is the distribution of total population, which was the variable that we were looking at. And so if we open the attribute table here, you can see that the variables that were in the market analysis are also here. So relative to the question that was about, can we group, have different groupings of age? So you can see that this is the households where the income is less than 20,000, households where it's between 20 and 35, and 35 and 50. So these are household counts. And then what you can do is use this then to calculate these numbers and to group these or aggregate them. So you would create a new field in ArcGIS and then say everything between 50 and 100,000 these are how many households are there. Okay, so hopefully it answers that question. Again, you can save this if you wish. Okay, so the other option is to that we do is number 5. It's summarize relative to system average, Title 6 option. So to do this, I'm going to switch to my Title 6 variable for minority population. So my map switched and my summary switched here. But I'm going to click on this enable summary. And what that's going to do is go out and calculate the system average for minority population, because that is the variable that I have selected here. And the system average is 30.72%. So what my map is telling me is that all of the darker shades of blue are those census blocks where their percent minority population is greater than the system average of 30%. And all of those that are in the lighter shade of blue are under the system average of 30%. So you can actually change this. So if you believe you want to show this relative to a different percentage, it could be 50%, then that changes your summary and your map here. So this is a pretty great way to interact with a few of the tools that are here in the data that's here to look at the percentage, whatever percentage you would want, and then show what's above and below it. And this is specifically a Title 6 function where you're looking at areas that are above and below the system average, but you can use this for other applications as well.